I knew something was off the second I stepped into the lobby and the receptionist wouldn't meet my eyes. And I mean wouldn't, like her pupils were magnetically glued to a crack in the marble floor. I hadn't even set my purse down when an Outlook ping hit my phone. Urgent performance review. 9:15 a.m. Conf. RM4C. Subject line all caps, no body, no signature. Cute. Let me set the stage here. I had just wrapped 12 consecutive quarters of growth. 12. We'd landed the Hastings account 3 weeks prior, projected $28 million in revenue over the next 3 years. I'd built that deal from a damn napkin sketch on a Delta flight. But now suddenly I'm getting ghost texted into a last-minute meeting like I'm about to be scolded for stealing someone's yogurt. When you've worked in finance this long, you develop a sixth sense, a psychic tickle in your spine when the vultures start circling. And my spine was screaming. Karen's door was cracked when I passed it. She was whispering to someone with that fake sympathy lilt she uses when she fires interns. The same one she used when she told Jenny from accounting that her role had evolved beyond her scope. Which is corporate for, we gave your job to a 22-year-old with a ring light and a stepdad on the board. Anyway, I took the long way to the meeting room. Not out of fear, just strategy. Gave myself time to breathe, scan the halls, and clock who was avoiding me. A few guilty heads turned. One guy I'd mentored for 5 years literally ducked into the copy room, and that's when I knew it was happening. I slipped into my office and opened the locked drawer. My original contract. 8 pages of legalese, 3 of which I'd renegotiated after Q4 last year. I flipped to clause 11C. Read it, reread it, ran my finger over the initials. Karen's, Brian's, mine, it was still there, my parachute, my kill switch. My insurance against exactly the kind of amateur hour screw job I was about to walk into. I folded the papers, slid them into my leather portfolio, and stood up. Adjusted my jacket, smiled into the mirror just once, then walked out. Now, if you've made it this far, you're even remotely curious about how this all backfired for them in the most expensive, public, gloriously irreversible way, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Maybe even drop a like. It keeps the stories rolling, and honestly, watching their downfall again in 4K deserves a little applause, don't you think? Back in the hallway, I passed the mural the CEO had commissioned after our Series D funding closed. A grotesque, backlit monstrosity of innovation. Funny, he never included the women who actually closed the deal. Just a bunch of stock photo models in VR goggles. When I got to conference room 4C, the blinds were already drawn. Karen was inside, sitting stiffly with 2 HR reps who looked like they'd just dry swallowed thumbtacks. Not a laptop in sight, no water, no printed reports, no performance discussion to be had, just the guillotine waiting for its cue. Victoria, Karen said, with this grimace that was trying to pass as empathy. Thanks for joining on such short notice. Of course, I said. I always make time for my team. Nobody smiled. She gestured to the chair. I didn't sit. There was a paper in front of her, one sheet, typed. I bet my 401k it was my termination notice. Karen cleared her throat like she was about to announce my dog had died. So I'll just get right to it. We're restructuring, and unfortunately, your position is being eliminated effective immediately. This decision is final and has been approved by leadership. Leadership, she meant Brian, who hadn't even bothered to show his boyish, botoxed face. I nodded slowly. No tears, no protest, just took a breath and said, understood. Karen blinked, surprised. Maybe she expected a meltdown, a scream, maybe even a beg, poor thing. She didn't know me at all. I'll need your badge, she added, almost apologetically. I handed it over, smiled, of course. And just like that, I was no longer an executive at Arcshire Financial. Except that wasn't true, not yet, because what Karen didn't realize, what none of them did, is that firing me one day before my bonus vested didn't save the money. It triggered a clause, Clause 11C, which meant they didn't just owe me $4 million. They owed me double, plus damages, but they'd find that out soon enough. I left conference room 4C like I was headed to lunch. Calm, collected, like the pink slip in my hand was just a damn Panera receipt. Karen stayed behind, probably sweating through her blazer, praying I wouldn't make a scene. HR didn't even follow me. They just sat there like mannequins in a discount suit showroom, waiting for their next restructure. I passed my office and didn't even glance at it. They'd box my things for me, or they'd toss them in the supply closet and pretend they never knew I was here. That's how this game works. You don't build empires, you get rented by them, then discarded the second your value outpaces your obedience. But what Karen, and Brian especially, never understood was that I never played by their rules. I just let them think I did. Instead of heading for the elevators down to the parking garage, I swiped into the executive lift and punched the button for floor 45, legal and compliance. I'd spent enough time up there during the Hastings deal to know who still had a soul behind their NDA-stamped eyes. The receptionist barely looked up until I dropped my leather folder onto her desk. Tell Aaron Patel I'm here, I said. She blinked. Do you have an appointment? I just got fired, I said with a smile. He'll want to see me. Aaron was an assistant counsel who used to shadow me during negotiations. Smart guy. Sharp. Once asked me if he should go private sector or stay and rot in corporate. I told him to stay just long enough to know where the bodies are buried and who buried them. 10 minutes later, I was in his office. He closed the door behind us and gave me that same deer in headlights look I'd seen in the mirror the day I found out Brian got the CEO role after I practically built the pipeline he was now strutting around on. You okay? He asked. They let me go, I said, effective immediately. No cause cited. No severance beyond standard. No mention of the incentive clause, his brow furrowed. Which clause? I opened the folder, flipped to the page, and handed it to him. Clause 11C, paragraph 3, subsection A. He scanned it once, then again slower. His face didn't change, but his eyes sharpened like a camera coming into focus. Did you add this during your Q4 renegotiation? They initialed every page. Brian even asked what the multiplier line meant. I told him it was to cover transitional risk if I left. He shrugged. Aaron sat back in his chair. Victoria, this clause is airtight. If they fired you within 24 hours of vesting, they owe you the full bonus, plus 50% of your final year's base, plus damages if contested in arbitration. Correct, I said, and it wasn't just Brian. Karen knew. She signed the implementation memo last December. I have the PDF with her metadata on the drive. Timestamped, notarized, backed up. 3 copies. Aaron let out a soft, horrified laugh. They thought they could short-circuit the payout by axing you a day early? They think termination voids obligation. But the clause activates because of the termination. This is going to melt faces upstairs, he muttered. I'm not here for revenge, I said. I'm here for enforcement, he nodded slowly. You want this escalated to lead counsel? I'd prefer if it came from you. At first, quietly. You've got relationships, I don't. And I'd rather the collapse happen from the inside out, not some LinkedIn spectacle. Aaron didn't say much after that. Just took a photo of the page, scanned my folder, and emailed himself the annotated packet. As I stood to leave, I said, don't worry about being on the wrong side of this. The wrong side was the one that thought I'd roll over. Outside his office, I didn't head to the garage. Not yet. I needed to make one more stop. I passed by the pantry on 43, saw 2 interns whispering over iced coffees, eyes wide like they'd seen a ghost. Word travels fast when the queen gets guillotined. Back in the elevator, I looked at my reflection in the steel, smoothed my hair, adjusted my collar, took a breath. They thought they'd buried me, but I wasn't dead. I was loaded, armed with paper, and their signatures. And in less than 24 hours, those signatures were going to cost them more than they ever made pretending to be smarter than me. Legal floor always smelled like printer toner and burnt ambition, like dreams laminated and filed away next to compliance manuals nobody reads until they're subpoenaed. I walked past the framed photos of past general counsels, all square-jawed men with glassy eyes and $1,000 suits, and found Sarah sitting exactly where I hoped she'd be, hunched over her monitor in a cubicle too small for the amount of institutional knowledge she carried. Sarah was the type who remembered everything: case law, birthdays, the name of my cat. She was also the first intern I ever mentored, back when she still used sticky notes instead of citation software and believed HR actually protected employees. Now, 5 years in, she knew better, and I was about to give her a front row seat to exactly why. She looked up, startled. Victoria, what are you? Didn't I just hear? You did, I said, handing her the folder. Clause 11C, annotated. Original contract, addendums, signature metadata, arbitration triggers. Also includes 3 backup references to the equity schedule Brian approved in Q4. She blinked. Wait, are you? Terminated, effective immediately. No cause cited, 1 day before vesting. Clock resets as of noon today. Sarah opened the folder slowly like it might detonate. Did Karen sign off on this? She did. Page 6 of the implementation memo. DocuSign from her iPad. Timestamps in the margin. Jesus. Clause activates upon involuntary termination without cause within 24 hours of any major equity event, including scheduled vesting. I didn't hide it, I highlighted it. Brian laughed and said, only lawyers read the fine print. Sarah was already on page 3 when she stopped, blinked, read the paragraph again, then again slower. Her mouth opened like she was about to speak, but the words got lost somewhere between her gut and her ethics. This clause, yes, I said, triggers an accelerated payout equal to 2x the equity value, plus base, plus benefits continuation, plus indemnity provisions if they try to stonewall. Victoria, this is delicious? She looked up at me, both horrified and impressed. They thought they were being clever. They thought I wouldn't notice a last-minute firing with no severance discussion, no legal presence, no memo from compliance. They thought wrong. Sarah glanced toward the hallway. Does Aaron know? He does. He's escalating to lead counsel, quietly. But I figured it wouldn't hurt if someone else started pulling the red thread too. She nodded, still absorbing it like her brain had just walked face first into a rake. Clause 11C. This language, it's surgical. I wrote it while recovering from pneumonia. Signed it in a hospital gown with Roman 4 in my arm. That's how far ahead I was playing. She shook her head, grinning despite herself. Might want to run this up the ladder, she said, holding the folder like it was radioactive. I leaned in a little closer. Sarah, this is one of those moments that defines you. You can flag it and pretend it's someone else's problem, or you can own it. Be the one who saw the fire coming and sounded the alarm. She didn't speak. but I saw the resolve slide into her posture like a metal rod. "I'll take it to Meredith," she said. "Right now, good." As I turned to leave, she asked, "What if they try to bury it?" "They can try," I said. "But it's already backed up in 3 places, with time stamps. One copy in Aaron's hands, one in my personal legal archive, and one," I paused, "in a drive labeled Brian's gift basket that automatically emails the full packet to the board if anyone modifies my employment record without a matching clause tag." Sarah's jaw dropped. "Are you serious?" I smiled. "They like to pretend I'm a file folder in heels. I let them. It's amazing what you can build in the dark if no one bothers to watch you closely." I walked out of legal like I owned the floor. Not a single person stopped me. Not one raised a hand or asked where I was going. That's the thing about quiet exits, people assume you've accepted defeat. But that morning, I wasn't leaving the building broken. I was leaving it booby-trapped, and someone had just tripped the wire. Karen stormed into the HR war room like she was auditioning for a panic attack. Red-faced, rapid blinking, already sweating through the silk lining of her blazer. She didn't even shut the door behind her. Just slammed her laptop on the table and barked, "We need documentation now." Across the table, Shelley from HR blinked like a turtle yanked from a pond. Documentation of what, exactly? Victoria's termination. Something that shows we had just cause. A waiver, a write-up, an incident log, anything. Shelley typed with 2 fingers, scrolling through an empty folder like it might magically populate with HR miracles. Karen, she's never even had a formal warning or a verbal coaching note. She's clean. Karen threw her hands up. There has to be something. She's building a case. She walked out of here way too calm, and now legal is, she stopped herself. Shelley's brow furrowed. Legal is what? Never mind, Karen snapped. Just keep looking. Downstairs in compliance, a quiet alarm had already started to ring. Sarah had passed the folder to Meredith, the board's lead counsel, who read it once, turned the color of skim milk, and requested a discreet but immediate review of Victoria's employment history, contract amendments, and compensation triggers. Meanwhile, Karen was now dialing extensions like her career depended on it, which, incidentally, it did. "Jerry, it's Karen," she said into her phone. "I need all the emails tied to Victoria's Q4 renegotiation. Contracts, internal approvals, equity schedules, everything." "What do you mean it's archived?" "Then unarchive it." At that same moment, Victoria was packing up her office upstairs. Not hurried, not angry, not even solemn, just methodical. Picture a surgeon cleaning their tools after a successful operation. She unplugged her docking station, folded her sweaters with geometric precision, and placed her old Rolodex. Yes, she still had one, into her leather tote like it was a relic of a better time. She glanced at the photo on her desk, her and her mother, 10 years ago, toasting with cheap champagne the day Victoria got the Arctron offer. "Be so good they have to notice," her mom had said. They noticed, just too late. Back in the bunker, Meredith stood silently behind Karen, who was now furiously scribbling something onto a notepad as if paperwork could reverse time. "Karen," Meredith said. Karen jumped like someone had dropped a gun on the table. "Yes." Meredith held up the packet. "Is this your signature on page 6 of the implementation memo?" Karen squinted. "Ah, yes, but I didn't read all the amendments. Brian just said we needed her to stay through Q4. Meredith raised an eyebrow. "And you initialed every page." "Well, yes. But we were rushing to finalize headcount projections." Meredith tapped the folder. "Clause 11C. It triggers a payout that doubles the standard equity incentive if an executive is terminated without cause within 24 hours of a major equity event." "Wait," Shelley said from across the room. "She was due to vest tomorrow." "Exactly," Meredith replied. "You fired her today." The room fell into a silence so thick it could have choked a priest. "Technically," Meredith continued, "this wasn't just mishandled, it was catastrophic. Her contract is enforceable. She gave us notice of the clause. We have a timestamped record of when it was received. That makes it worse." Karen sat down hard as if gravity had remembered she existed. "We were trying to save the company $4 million, she whispered. Meredith's lips flattened. "You may have cost it 6. Maybe more." Somewhere around the same time, a calendar invite appeared on the board chair's assistant screen. Subject: urgent, Victoria Owens Equity Clause Review. Priority highest. Sender: lead counsel. Back upstairs, Victoria zipped her bag shut. Looked around her office one last time. It looked smaller now, like the walls had caved in slightly. Like the space knew it had lost something it couldn't replace. She walked out with nothing but a tote, her heels clicking steadily against the tile. Past the photos of Employee of the Month winners. Past the glass cases full of trophies for innovation and team excellence. She paused only once at the elevator. One of the new hires from marketing stood there awkwardly. "Hey, Victoria, is it true? They let you go?" She smiled politely. "That's the rumor. But you like you were the department," she shrugged. "Then I guess they're about to find out what life's like without it." Ding, the elevator opened. She stepped inside, turned, and just before the doors closed, she added, "If anyone asks, tell them to read Clause 11C. Then she vanished, and the real unraveling began. Victoria was sitting at a quiet corner table in a cafe 4 blocks from Arctron headquarters, one of those third-wave places where the chairs were reclaimed wood, and the coffee came with a paragraph about its origin story. She wasn't there for ambience. She was there for the Wi-Fi, the line of sight to the front door, and the peace of watching rich tech guys panic through Bluetooth headsets. She sipped slowly, checked her phone, and there it was. From Meredith Liu, lead board counsel subject. Clause 11C acknowledged time, 10:41 a.m. Victoria, we are currently reviewing your termination file and contract clause 11C. Your annotated documentation has been received. Timestamp confirms delivery. Will advise shortly. No apology, no flattery, just cold. Clipped legalese, the kind that meant they'd realized she hadn't been bluffing. She smiled, then opened her encrypted backup app. 3 versions of her contract sat there, as pristine as the day they were scanned. Every page annotated, every signature clean. Every single initial from Brian, Karen, and 2 members of the compensation committee logged, timestamped, and filed, complete with location metadata. She even had a screen recording of the Zoom meeting where the final equity plan was approved, complete with Brian sipping rosé and saying, yeah, whatever legal wants, just get her to stay through year-end. Across town, on the 44th floor of Arkshiren HQ, Meredith slid the packet across the glossy conference room table with the kind of gentleness you'd use to hand someone a live grenade. Brian picked it up lazily, like a man swatting away a housefly. This again? He muttered. She's bluffing. She's not bluffing, Meredith said flatly. She's executing. Karen was in the corner, arms folded so tightly her fingers were turning purple. But if we already fired her, you didn't void the bonus, Meredith interrupted. You activated it. The clause explicitly states that termination without documented cause within 24 hours of a scheduled equity vest triggers accelerated payout terms. Brian blinked. We did that before it vested. That's the point. Meredith tapped the packet. You did it within the 24-hour trigger window. The clause doesn't just cover the moment of vesting, it protects against any last-second maneuvering. And you initialed that language yourself. Page 4, lower right corner. Timestamp 12:43 p.m., February 19th, during your Q4 board session. Brian's face dropped half an inch. No one reads that stuff. I thought legal was just being thorough. Meredith didn't even blink. We were. He flipped to the page, scanned it, and visibly flinched. Jesus. She also submitted her full termination file to Aaron Patel and Sarah Clark within 90 minutes of leaving the building. She has a digital trail that shows she notified 3 internal channels before your department even uploaded her exit memo. Karen let out a choked laugh. She was planning this. Meredith looked at her. Eyebrows raised. She was planning not to be robbed. Big difference. Back at the cafe, Victoria leaned back in her chair. It was that rare, electric feeling, vindication, but still wrapped in silence. The moment right before the world admits you were right. The pause before the storm understands it's about to rain in the wrong direction. Her phone buzzed again. From Sarah Clark subject. FYI clause language circulating time. 11:07 a.m. Meredith has forwarded your clause file to the compensation committee and external counsel. Things are moving quickly. Not everyone is happy. Stay alert. Victoria tapped out a simple reply. Understood. Let me know if they attempt to amend anything retroactively. I have version history on every doc. Then she closed her email, opened a crossword puzzle app, and got to work on a 7-letter word for poetic justice. Inside Arkshiren, Brian was pacing now. So what's the damage? Meredith flipped through her notes. Standard payout was $4 million. Clause 11C adds a multiplier based on remaining unvested equity, plus a penalty for premature termination without cause, plus damages if she seeks arbitration. Ballpark it, he snapped. 6.5, she said, eyes cold. Assuming she doesn't push for more. Brian turned to Karen. You said this would save us money. Karen's voice was barely above a whisper. It was supposed to. They sat in silence. Then Brian muttered, fine, offer her a severance package, something clean, half of it, NDA, whatever it takes. Meredith didn't move. She already turned it down. What do you mean? She never asked for settlement, Meredith said. She didn't even ask for mediation. She just submitted the clause, the timestamps, and the chain of signatures. Karen swallowed hard. Then what the hell does she want? And that was the question, wasn't it? Because Victoria hadn't asked for anything, which meant she already knew she didn't have to. The door to conference room Arkshiren slammed shut like a coffin lid. Inside, the temperature dropped 10 degrees and not from the air conditioning. Meredith Liu, the company's lead counsel, stood at the head of the table, eyes sharp, jaw locked. She wasn't wearing her usual courtroom smile or corporate charm lipstick. She was wearing war paint, subtle but unmistakable. Brian, Karen, and the full compensation committee were already seated, water untouched, notepads unopened. The silence was thick enough to stir with a fork. Let's get one thing straight, Meredith began, pulling a stack of printed documents from a leather folio and slapping them down like evidence in a criminal trial. This isn't a miscommunication. It's not an HR oversight. This is a ticking liability with a lit fuse we lit ourselves. Brian leaned back, trying to play it cool. Look, we know she's making noise, but she's bluffing. She's always been dramatic. She's not bluffing, Meredith snapped, louder than anyone expected. And this isn't drama. This is contractual suicide. She opened the folder and pulled out a single page, sliding it across the table to Karen. Page 6 of the Q4 amendment. Your signature. Karen didn't even look. I didn't read every line, you initialed every line, Meredith cut in. And so did Brian. You both signed off on Clause 11C, including the activation multiplier language, the vesting window clause, and the constructive termination trigger. Constructive termination? Brian repeated, brow furrowed. Means you fired her under circumstances designed to avoid paying her a contractual obligation, Meredith explained. Which, in the eyes of the law, is the same as firing her because of that obligation. Karen paled, but we fired her for restructuring. We didn't mention the bonus. That's precisely the problem, Meredith said. There's no cause documented, no performance flags, no disciplinary notes, no redundancy justification filed with HR. We walked her out 23 hours before a scheduled equity vest, without reason, and thought that would void her bonus. What it actually did was activate every financial protection she embedded in that clause. She turned to the rest of the room now. Gentlemen, ladies, this was not just a poor decision. This was a $6.5 million trigger wrapped in arrogance and fired like a starter's pistol. One of the committee members cleared his throat. Is this enforceable? Beyond enforceable, Meredith said. She has timestamps, backups, email trails, and metadata. Her termination was filed internally 37 minutes after she submitted her clause to legal and compliance. That creates the impression, legally and publicly, of retaliation. Brian muttered something under his breath and pushed his chair back like he was about to walk out. Meredith raised her voice. Sit down. He froze. He'd never heard her speak to him like that before. Meredith walked slowly to the touchscreen at the head of the table, tapped in a command, and brought up a document on the 80-inch display. The original equity agreement. Scanned. Digitally signed. She zoomed in. Clause 11C. In the event of involuntary or constructive termination within 24 hours preceding a scheduled equity vesting event, the subject shall be entitled to full vesting acceleration, immediate payout at current market value, and additional compensation calculated at 1.5x base salary. Arbitration shall be waived at the employee's sole discretion. A silence fell so loud it roared. Who the hell approved that clause? Someone whispered. Meredith tapped again. A signature line filled the screen. Board Chair Lawrence straightened. The room let out a collective groan. Brian's eyes went wide. Wait, Lawrence signed that? He did, Meredith said, back in 2019, before we'd closed Series B. Victoria wrote the clause as retention insurance. Lawrence agreed it was fair given her role in structuring our early compliance infrastructure. It sat untouched for 3 years, and now it's about to cost us the GDP of a small nation. Karen, barely above a whisper, why didn't we catch it? Meredith's voice dropped to a deadly calm. Because you never read the fine print. You were too focused on headlines and handshakes. Meanwhile, Victoria was writing her escape plan in plain sight. In ink, with your initials. The committee shifted uneasily. Someone finally dared to ask, is there a fix? Meredith shook her head. No clean one. If we try to settle now, it'll signal guilt. If we go to court, we'll lose. If we stall, she can escalate to the board. If we try to retroactively justify the firing, she's got version control data on every document, including yours, Brian, locked in her personal legal archive. She's been 10 steps ahead since the moment she handed you her badge. Brian slumped back in his chair. What does she want? Meredith stared at him. She doesn't want anything. That's the part you still don't get. She doesn't need anything. She already won. The call came in just after noon, while Victoria was sitting alone in the rooftop garden of her condo building. Her phone buzzed once, then again. She didn't recognize the number, but she knew who it was before she even touched the screen. There was a specific flavor of corporate panic that only came from the upper echelons, the kind that vibrated through glass and steel and bonus structures. She answered on the second ring, calm as ever. Victoria Owens, she said, sipping her tea. Victoria, the voice said, cool and composed, but just slightly frayed around the edges. It's David Halpern. From the board, she smiled faintly. Halpern had once offered her a position at a rival firm, directly, discreetly, and with enough zeros to make her pause. He'd always had a decent radar for where the real power lived in a company, and she suspected that's exactly what prompted this call. David, she said warmly. To what do I owe the pleasure? I'll get to it, he said. Did you intend to trigger Clause 11C? She didn't even blink. They terminated me. I just made sure I left a paper trail. A silence, thick and thoughtful, she let it hang. I've read the clause, he said finally. The annotations, your timestamps. Frankly, it's one of the cleanest risk shields I've ever seen embedded in an incentive package. I had good mentors, she said, some of them on your board. He chuckled under his breath, not joy. Admiration edged with dread. Brian still insisting it was an oversight. I'm sure he is. Karen's claiming she never understood the multiplier. She understood enough to sign it twice and push it through without review, Victoria replied. That memo she sent on December 14th? I flagged the language in bold, underlined. Her initials are on the margin. Timestamped. Metadata intact, Christ, David muttered. Another pause, then a different voice entered the background. Muffled but urgent. David, she didn't just trigger the payout. There's a secondary multiplier tied to the equity value ratio. Just recalculated it. Victoria waited, listening to the scramble like it was symphony. 6.4 million, the voice said. Possibly more, depending on the market value recalibration at the time of termination. David came back on. Our CFO just confirmed what legal was afraid of. Because of the clause's reference to unvested equity and the 1.5x multiplier, your payout is actually above 6 million. Victoria didn't respond immediately. She was watching a pigeon pace along the railing like it was conducting a board meeting of its own. David, she said calmly, you're not calling to debate the payout. You're calling to assess the fallout. I'm calling, he admitted, because Karen is about to be thrown to the wolves and Brian's pretending he can't hear the howling. Meredith wants to settle, but you haven't made a move. No counteroffer, no statement, no lawyer. Why? Victoria leaned back in her chair. Because I don't need to. I played this by the book. I wrote the book. They just forgot I never stopped editing it. David exhaled long and low. They'll ask for arbitration. They can request it, she replied. The clause gives me sole discretion to decline. Litigation, she shrugged. They'll lose, the documentation's airtight, and they know it. That's why Meredith hasn't reached out directly. She's buying time, hoping I flinch. You won't, he said quietly. I haven't yet. Soft laugh. You know, Victoria, you always struck me as too composed for this business. Too methodical, but watching this unfold, I realize now that you weren't calm because you lacked fire. You were calm because you knew where every fuse was buried. That's why they hired me, she said, and why they shouldn't have fired me. The line went quiet for a moment. Then David said, I assume you'll be getting counsel involved eventually. I already did, she said, 3 years ago, and I wrote Clause 11C. Click. End call. She didn't smirk, she didn't gloat. She simply looked up at the sky and watched the clouds pass overhead. 6 million was never the point, not really. The point was they built an empire on her spine and thought they could kick it out from under themselves without consequences. But Victoria wasn't angry. She was precise. And precision always finds its target. The executive suite was dead silent, unnaturally so. The kind of silence you only get after the last champagne bottle's been emptied and someone finally notices the floor is on fire. Everyone had been summoned. No agenda, no coffee, just a hastily booked leadership sync that smelled more like a trial than a meeting. Brian sat at the head of the table, jaw tight, arms crossed like a teenager sent to detention. Karen sat to his left, visibly trembling. Legal pad in front of her with nothing written but the word defensible in 5 different styles of handwriting. The CFO was ghost pale. The head of HR looked like she was rethinking every career choice she'd made since college, and the only person moving with purpose was Meredith Liu, lead counsel, and currently the only adult in the room. She dropped the packet on the table like a gavel. You've all read Clause 11C, she began. But allow me to read it aloud. One final time, so there is no further misunderstanding about what has just occurred. She didn't wait for permission. In the event of involuntary or constructive termination within 24 hours preceding a scheduled equity vesting event, the subject shall be entitled to full equity acceleration, compensation equivalent to 1.5x base salary, and associated damages as calculated under the pre-approved performance incentive plan. Employer waives arbitration in the case of demonstrable bad faith dismissal. She closed the file, slowly removed her glasses, and turned to Brian like a firing squad lining up its first shot. Brian, her voice was low and cracking. Please tell me you paid her. Brian blinked. Excuse me? Meredith stood straighter. Tell me right now that you issued her the bonus before the termination went through. He shifted in his seat. We terminated her before it vested. That was the point. The room went still. Jesus Christ, Meredith whispered. I mean, he added, palms up, if we fire her before the bonus vests, we don't have to pay it. That's how these things work. Everyone knows that. No, Meredith snapped, loud enough to make Karen flinch. That's how you think it works. That clause wasn't written to avoid payment. It was written to protect the employee from exactly that kind of maneuver. The CFO looked up now, eyes haunted. You've already received a notice of intention to collect damages. It came through 2 hours ago. Her counsel submitted a certified statement with backup files, timestamps, internal emails, everything. Brian scoffed. So what? We counter. Negotiate. Offer half no, Meredith said. You don't negotiate with someone holding a loaded contract and a detonator in the other hand. She doesn't need to talk, she just has to wait. And right now, the board is demanding to know why you authorized a termination without legal review or just caused documentation inside a protected clause window. Brian's smirk was fading now. Okay, so we pay her the bonus. Worst case, 4 million. Meredith turned to the CFO. Tell him. The CFO's face was grim. With the equity recalculations, performance triggers, and multiplier clause, Karen let out a strangled whisper. Multiplier? The CFO nodded. It's not 4 million. It's 6.5, and that's before damages. Brian leaned back in his chair like he'd just been hit with a sledgehammer. You can't be serious. She even submitted the meeting transcript from the Q4 session, where you dismissed her clause concerns on record, Meredith added. We're talking about a paper trail that might as well be written in blood. Brian looked around, suddenly aware that no one was coming to his defense. The VP of Operations cleared his throat. So what happens now? Meredith took a long, slow breath. Now, the board reviews the breach. They'll likely force a full payout to Victoria and issue a vote on restitution. If they deem it malicious, she turned to Brian, staring straight into his soul. They'll hold you personally liable. Karen looked like she might throw up. HR began quietly packing her things. The CFO rubbed his temples like he was trying to press reality out of his skull. Brian finally found his voice again. She planned this. She set us up. Meredith's eyes narrowed. She protected herself. And you walked straight into the clause she warned you about. She didn't hide it. You just never read it. Silence fell again, colder this time. Heavier. The kind of silence you feel in your teeth. Then the board's secretary opened the door, hesitant, eyes wide. Apologies, she said. The chair's requesting your presence, all of you. Immediately. Meredith didn't move. She turned to Brian one last time. This wasn't a mistake. It was a masterclass, and you failed every test. Then she stood, gathered the contract packet, and walked out without waiting for him. Brian didn't move. Karen didn't breathe. The wolves were no longer howling. They were inside the building. The skyline outside Victoria's Austin hotel room was all glass, cranes, and ambition, every tower trying to outshine the next like a prom queen contest made of steel. She stood barefoot on the balcony in a robe that cost more than her first apartment rent, phone in one hand, a cool glass of something dangerously floral in the other. A notification pinged softly from her inbox. Subject: Settlement Package Arkshiran Financial from External Counsel on behalf of Board of Directors Attachment. Final Settlement Agreement. Payment confirmation $6,586,250 and 0 cents note. Please review and return signed NDA within 5 business days. No public disclosure permitted without express board consent. She didn't open the NDA, didn't need to. The numbers were there. The payment was real. The damage already done. Her old company hadn't even managed to spin it. No press release. No new direction announcement. Just a quiet purge disguised as restructuring. Karen was already gone, resigned to pursue new opportunities, per the company intranet. Everyone inside knew it was a mercy killing. As for Brian, reassigned. That was the word they chose. Rumor had it he was now leading innovation initiatives in a newly invented department that had neither a budget nor an office. Last week, one of her old team members leaked a photo of his new title badge. Read Executive Liaison, Internal Alignment. Translation: Exiled without ceremony. Victoria didn't return any of the voicemails, not Meredith's, not Sarah's, not even David Halpern's last-minute olive branch offer to connect her with some advisory boards. She didn't need their handshakes. She already had their signatures. And she was busy. Busy meeting with the executive team at Westridge Capital, who flew her in after hearing whispers about how she sank a CEO with a single clause. They weren't hiring her for a role. They were offering her a seat at the table. Partner track, strategy division, autonomy, equity, a pen, not just a signature line. But tonight wasn't about negotiations. Tonight was about punctuation. She sat down on a lounger by the rooftop pool, kicked her feet up, and took a picture. Sand-colored tile beneath her toes. A drink perched beside her with a ridiculous garnish poking out. In the background, the city gleamed like $1 million apology. She opened her texts, scrolled until she found the last saved number from her Arkshiran days, the board chair, typed one sentence, clause 11C, line 22, then attached the photo. No caption, no emoji, just the final word. Line 22, if anyone had forgotten, was the clause's closing statement, written in her own phrasing when legal let her adjust the language after 2 late-night calls and a bottle of wine. Failure to honor the terms herein shall constitute not only breach, but a systemic lapse in judgment subject to restitution, review, and reputational consequence. They'd initialed it. Brian had even chuckled at the wording. Now the clause had played out, start to finish, like a stage play she'd directed in silence. She hit send, watched the screen fade, took another sip of her drink. And for the first time in years, she felt it, not revenge, not satisfaction, not even victory, just clarity. She hadn't burned the bridge. She'd walked away from it with the deed in her hand, sold the land underneath, and charged them rent for the ashes. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit 'em.